Okay, welcome everybody. Just wanted to go over a few CSS animations. As you can see here, I've written some code to demonstrate some of that. We've created this mushroom here that is all out of CSS. If you want to look at some of that, you can see. Just using some before and after tags for shadowing and all that good stuff. We also have Pac-Man, which you gotta add some Pac-Man animations in there just for fun. So you'll notice I have several buttons up, and these buttons, basically all that they're doing is they're going through and they're adding in and removing classes from the mushroom div. So for example, we have our button with these IDs, and then whenever those buttons are clicked, I add the animation of reset classes or the class to that, or perform that function. I'll show you in my JavaScript where that's happening. So in here we've got our Pac-Man animation. So if I ever want to run Pac-Man, that button runs there. It's a var because I needed it to be in the global scope for the way that I set this up. I have a few other functions here, updating the mushroom, resetting the classes, adding a class. We get the mushroom. This is just to make it easier for me to call this function. Add class, just checking to make sure that we have the mushroom class, and then we add it, and then reset classes. Again, that's just going into the mushroom and putting the classes back to just say mushroom on it. And then this is the last one that goes through and gets all of the buttons. So it gets element by ID, which is buttons, which goes in right here and grabs this element, and then grabs all of the buttons inside of it, loops through. If it's a Pac-Man button, then we do this. Or sorry, if it's not Pac-Man, we do this. When it's clicked, we add that event listener. Otherwise, we add in the Pac-Man click. So as you can see, there was already that Pac-Man animation. I'm going to show you a few of those, and these are some of the animations that I wrote. So if you look, we've got rotate right infinite, and that will be applied to the mushroom. So the way that I wrote these is, these are called keyframes, which basically is a way of creating an animation that you can then use later on in a class here. So I also created a class called rotate right infinite. So when I click on this rotate right infinite button, it applies that class to it, and when I reset, it removes that class. So I'm using longhand notation to start us off here, just so you can kind of see some of the different properties associated with animation, similar to margin, how you can just say margin 0 pixels, 0 pixels, 5 pixels, or whatever if you want to specify, or you can say margin top 0, margin bottom 0. That's similar to what's going on here. So this class that I created, I found it a lot easier to append animations through JavaScript this way, rather than going through jQuery or other routes. So we have our animation name, which is rotate right infinite, and this looks for a keyframe, which this one's just saying, hey, transform. We're going to start at 0 degrees, and we're going to go from that to our 360 degrees. You can also use percentages here. I'm not sure if I do that anywhere or not, but you could say like 0%, and then whatever you want the animation to be at 0%, and then 20% it's this, and 30% it's this, 100% it's this. So that's just another way of writing a keyframe. The next is the duration. So we have our rotate right infinite, and again you'll notice that this just adds this class of rotate right infinite, and it has a duration of 3 seconds. If we want it to be shorter, we can make it last 1 second, or if we want it to be really long. The nice thing about using the inspect element is you can kind of change these as you go. So we'll go back to that, reset it, and back in our sources. So we have animation fill mode. This one actually doesn't matter for the mushroom, for the rotate right infinite, because I'm using the animation iteration count of infinite. So you can specify, again, if I wanted to say that this is going to run 2 times, you'll see it just stopped there because it's only running 2 times, or if I wanted it to run 5 times, and we added that in, then it should just run 5 times before it finishes. So we'll see if that works as expected. I'm not sure if it works properly through the console or not, but that's kind of the idea behind it, is you can tell it what you want it to be. And I think that's going to run 5 times. But infinite is what I'm doing on this one because I just wanted it to keep on running forever and for 3 seconds or 4 seconds, whatever it was that I said. So the fill mode is interesting because you can have it take the state that you started at. So for example, we have this fade out class which removes, let me see if I can find that one. So it starts at opacity of 1 and takes it to the opacity of 0. So if you don't have a fill mode of forwards on that, if you have no fill mode, then it doesn't persist the animation at the end of the animation when the animation is done. But if you say forwards, it'll take that. And you can see that just removed the mushroom again. Backwards does the opposite. So if you wanted it to start at 360 and then end at whatever the initial start was, that's what it would end up doing for you. And then the transition timing function, you can specify a lot of different things, linear, ease in, and I know Dr. Little talked a little bit about this. You can actually kind of see this a little bit better with the actual Pac-Man element. So if we add the class of rotate right infinite here, you'll notice that this is rotating at a linear pace. It's hard to tell with the mushroom because it's oblong. But with Pac-Man, you can kind of see if we did like an ease in, it would start at a different rate and then not rotate at the same. Although that doesn't look like it's doing that because it might have some other transitions on the Pac-Man itself. But again, that's just a way, like Dr. Little was talked about, of changing how quickly the animation occurs. So again, we have like our little fade out, we got fade in, I wrote fade in here, and that'll take it from an opacity of 0 up to 1. I did put all of this. We do have an animation play state as well, so you can actually change this if it could be either running or paused. Running obviously means that it's going to apply the animation, and pause just means that the animation would stop where it's at. Other ones I wrote, so I wrote, let's look at slide left. So you can translate, if you slide left out, you can do multiple animations at once. So this one translates from x of 0 with an opacity of 1. This is kind of similar to what we did with the scriptures assignment when we changed out of the, or between scriptures or verses. So you can do that. You can also slide it in. So if you notice, there's out, in, I have a slide right out. And these are all just animations that I wrote. They're pretty simple, but there's a lot that you can do with it. Let's see, what else do we got? We've got slide right in, we have grow, so you can scale the element that you're interested in. You can reset this and we can go for a shrink. Those are all options available. Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to show. You can also, you may have noticed, but I've started writing these in the shorthand notation here. So you can save a lot of space compared to animation name, animation duration right here. You can see that this is quite verbose, whereas if you were to say animation, then the name, the duration, the fill mode, and the transition timing right here, those are all a lot easier to understand when you have the ability to put that as the shorthand notation. The last thing that I wanted to show is you can combine your animation. So again, here's my Pac-Man. I'm curious what it looks like, if it'll still rotate or not. But we have, here's where I use the percentages. So you start at 2 pixels or 0 pixels, and then at 10% of the animation duration. So if your duration is 10 seconds, then this would be at 1 second. You would want the element at 200 pixels. The property left would be at 200 pixels, and all the way down until you get to your 2. And then this Waka Waka animation is just what makes the mouth open or close. There's actually just a pseudo element on here. Right here, it just has a border, and this one is the eye, I believe. But this is just like a border top that you can kind of look at, and it looks really funny without all of that. So I spent some time on that Pac-Man at one point in my life. I figured I'd use it again. But yeah, so you can actually add in, you'll notice here it's doing the mouth, but it didn't do the left for whatever the reason is. I'm assuming that there's conflict between this rotate right infinite and the actual pull left across animation. So there went that pull left across animation right here. And again, that just comes from this. I think, oh yeah, so you'll notice that this one I just wrote inside of my Pac-Man class. I just said animation is pull left across. So that's the other nice thing about writing a keyframe, is you can just call these anytime. You don't have to associate them with a class per se, and anytime you want, if you're just writing a new element or a new CSS style that you are just like, oh, I need this slide left animation, you could just do the same idea here where I put in to my Pac-Man, in my CSS, in my main, we have Pac-Man. I appended this animation of pull left across, and that's totally fine to do as well. So that's some keyframe animations. Hope you enjoyed it, and have a good day.